Well, here we are again, the last night of the week. And I think what we'll be doing is finishing up with Haslam versus Lockwood, the Trover case. It's going to go in a lot of different directions tonight, so again, hold on to your seats. Haslam versus Lockwood, Trover. Let's just start with that again. Let's just figure out what Trover is so we don't, I know it's been a while since we covered it. Trover, Black's Law, page 1351. In common law practice, the action of Trover or Trover in conversion is a species of action on the case and originally laid for the recovery of damages against a person who had found another's goods and wrongfully converted them to his own use. Found another's goods and wrongfully converted them to his own use. Subsequently, the allegation of the loss of the goods by the plaintiff and the finding of them by the defendant was merely fictitious, and the action became the remedy for any wrongful interference with or detention of the goods of another. In form, a fiction. In substance, a remedy to recover the value of personal chattels wrongfully converted by another to his own use. A possessory action wherein plaintiff must show that he has either a general or special property in thing converted, and that the right to its possession at the time of the alleged conversion. Such remedy lies only for wrongful appropriation of goods, chattels, or personal property, which is specific enough to be identified. I like where it says, in form, a fiction. In substance, a remedy to recover. Interesting way to describe that. So let's go back to the idea of what Haslam versus Lockwood was all about. I'm only going to read the first two paragraphs, and then we're going to move on pretty quick. The plaintiff directed his servant to rake abandoned horse manure into heaps that had accumulated in a public street, intending to carry it away the next day. Before he could do so, the defendant, who had no knowledge of the plaintiff's actions, found the heaps and hauled them off to his own land. The plaintiff sued the defendant in Trover, demanding payment for the price of the manure. The trial court held for the defendant, stating he owed nothing to the plaintiff. The plaintiff appealed, and the appellate court of Connecticut held for the plaintiff, remanding the case for a new trial. The manure originally belonged to the owners of the horses that dropped it, but when the owners abandoned it on the road, it became the property of the man who was first to claim it. The court found that the best owner after the act of abandonment was the borough of Stamford, Connecticut, where the manure was found. In the absence of a claim to the manure by the officials of Stamford, the plaintiff was entitled to it by reason of Trover. The plaintiff was entitled to damages because the defendant had committed a conversion. The manure had not become part of the real estate, as the defendant had argued. It remained separate and unattached to the land, and hence was not part of the fee of estate. Comparing manure to seaweed and laws of the 19th century having to do with the scraping into piles of natural things of this sort, the court held that 24 hours is a reasonable time for the defendant to wait to take the manure, that by this standard, the fruits of his labor of raking into piles, the plaintiff was granted a new trial over the issue of damages. Now here's, right off the bat, it says it remained. There's a line in here that says the manure had not become part of the real estate. The waste material had not become part of the real estate, as the defendant had argued. It remained separate and unattached to the land, and hence was not part of the fee of estate. I want to go over this real quick. In other words, real estate, in order for it to be considered real estate, it cannot be separate from the land. And here it says it remains separate and unattached to the land. So real estate is very specific. And so I'm going to go to Webster's online real quick. I'm going to look at the definition of real estate by a couple of different sources here online. Real estate by Investopedia. Investopedia, what is real estate? Real estate is property comprised of land and the buildings on it, as well as the natural resources of the land, including uncultivated flora and fauna, farmed crops and livestock, water and minerals. Although media often refers to the real estate market from the perspective of residential living, real estate can be grouped into three broad categories based on its use: residential, commercial, and industrial. Examples of residential real estate include undeveloped land, houses, condominiums, and townhomes. Examples of commercial real estate are office buildings, warehouses, and retail store buildings. And examples of industrial real estate are factories, mines, and farms. Real estate by Merriam-Webster. Real estate: property in buildings and land. It also says space and capacity. I'm just going to go to space here real quick. I didn't look at it earlier, but I just want to see what they say about space. Interesting. Space, which you're calling real estate, by the way. A period of time. Also its duration. 2, a limited extent in 1, 2, or 3 dimensions. An extent set apart or available. Set apart. The distance from other people or things that a person needs in order to remain comfortable. Space. You're in my space. 3, one of the degrees between or above or below the lines of a musical staff. This is all considered real estate, according to Merriam-Webster. Real estate. The space between musical notes is real estate. A boundless three-dimensional extent in which objects and events occur. Objects and events occur and have relative position and direction. Physical space, independent of what occupies it. Physical space, independent of what occupies it. So right now, I'm sitting in the chair. But if I get up and move over to the couch, the space I occupied is still here. I just happen to be in it right now. But even when I get up and move, I may not be occupying the space, but the space still exists. The region beyond the Earth's atmosphere or beyond the solar system. 6, a blank area separating words or lines. 6b, material used to produce such blank area. Interesting. 7, a set of mathematical elements and especially of abstractions of all the points on a line, in a plane, or in physical space. A set of mathematical entities with a set of axioms of geometric character. 8, lineage. 8b, broadcast time available especially to advertisers. Space. 9, accommodations on a public vehicle. Isn't that interesting? Accommodations on a public vehicle. It's like a seat on a bus is considered space. And that seat on the bus, the space that you could sit in, is considered real estate. Interesting. 10, and last one, is the opportunity to assert or experience one's identity or needs freely. What? Think about this. Number 10, space. The opportunity to assert or experience one's identity or needs freely. And B, an opportunity for privacy or time to oneself. Hey, man, I need some more space. But that is considered real estate. I find that interesting. So I'm going to go back to, I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to go to real estate at the Business Dictionary online. Real estate, Business Dictionary online. Land and anything fixed, immovable, or permanently attached to it, such as appurtenances, buildings, fences, fixtures, improvements, roads, shrubs, and trees, but not growing crops, sewers, structures, utility systems, and walls. Title to real estate normally includes title to air rights, mineral rights, and surface rights, which can be bought, leased, sold, or transferred altogether or separately. Also called real property or realty. I was interested in the word attached in that paragraph. So let me see what the Business Dictionary Online says about attached. A term used in real estate transactions to indicate multi-family or multi-unit dwelling. An attached home is a structure which shares a common wall or walls with another unit. Shares a common wall or walls with another unit. If you can envision that drawing of the zygote that I had, and then the partition or the separation upon cell division, that partition or that would be a wall between what becomes the baby. It ultimately could become the chorion, or the amnion. What happens is that separation is a wall, but look at, they're still sharing the same. It's a common wall. So between me and the chorion in the womb, we share a common wall. And if you go back to real estate, the concept of space, me and the chorion, which is the fetal afterbirth material, share the same space within the boundaries of the zygote itself. Let's keep going here. Some examples of attached dwellings are townhomes, condominiums, row houses, apartment buildings, and high-rise residential towers. It says many of this style of dwelling features common grounds, either shared or jointly owned. Common grounds, either shared or jointly owned. That's attached. That's attached. Joint. So let's go back to Haslam versus Lockwood. My ride's here. Just kidding. Let me click out of these things. Haslam versus Lockwood. I'm going to go to the findings now, which is the judges, how the case turned out. How the case turned out. And then we're going to close up with this because we're going to go from there to something that is basically connected with it. So the opinion of the court. This is Haslam versus Lockwood. The opinion delivered by Judge Park. We think the manure scattered upon the ground, remember that real estate, common grounds. We think the manure scattered upon the ground under the circumstances of this case was personal property. Oh, just like my buddy Kyle said, that when you jack up a house, because my buddy Kyle actually does jack up houses, and he says the moment he takes the house off of the land and it's no longer a fixture or no longer connected to the land itself, the house is no longer real estate. It's personal property. Well, the same holds true with your father's name. In fact, what was it? Summa Theologica. The Summa Theologica, if you go to P-Cloud, if you go to, where was it? In the student file, the father, what is the father? Where's the father's position? It says in the Summa Theologica that the offspring derives its formal complement from the father, but the substance of the body from the mother. In other words, the name itself. Now, father does offer, obviously, his genetics, but they're saying at the Roman Catholic level that the father gives the formal complement. In other words, my father gave me Kallenbach, the last name, the formal complement. And my mother gives me the substance, the land itself. And so in order for me to not be illegitimate or a bastard, I need to have my father's name attached the substance or my body. Without that, I have no real estate. And remember what the definition of real estate is. So that's what we're getting at. In fact, it's funny. Even growing up, I would catch weird things. But in the Charlie Brown Christmas special came out in 1965. I remember, I think it was Lucy. When Charlie asked Lucy why she was so upset and what she really wanted for Christmas, Lucy, the child, says, real estate. Because that's what we're all missing. Remember that ultimately we don't have a claim upon our own land. We don't have real estate. We may have one or the other. We might have the land or the title, but it needs to be bound together. It needs to be one upon the other in order for it to be considered real estate, which is why it was funny that this little under 10-year-old said real estate. It's all over the place. We need to just open our eyes to it. So that's the Summa Theologica. Let me get out of this. Formal complement from Father, or the name. So let's get back to the case. It says that under the circumstances of this case was personal property. In other words, they're saying that the waste material did not become part of the land. So when the poop drops onto the ground, when it got carried off and spread on somebody else's property, they're still saying that it was personal property. It was separate. It was movable. It was a chattel. It was personal property. It says the cases referred to by the defendant to show that it was real estate are not on point. The defendant says that when he brought it home and scattered it on the ground, it became part or appurtenant to the ground, connected to the ground. That's what the defendant was saying. So what is appurtenant? What is appurtenance? Appurtenant. Back to blacks for a second. 94, page 94. Belonging to. So an appurtenance is that which belongs to something else. That which belongs to something else. An adjunct, an appendage, something annexed to another thing more worthy as principle. I hope to God you're thinking about this chorion, this afterbirth material, the fetal tissue. When I was a zygote, when I was in the womb as a zygote, it was attached to me. I became the baby. It became the fetal afterbirth waste material. But it was connected to me. It says, something annexed to another thing more worthy as principle. I am the principle. And which passes as incident to it as a right of way or other easement to land. Now look at, if my mother leaves that fetal tissue back there in the hospital, they're still saying that it creates an easement. An easement to what? It creates an easement to me. And if it's picked up through eminent domain, it creates a public easement to me, which passes incident to it as a right-of-way or other easement to land, an outhouse, barn, garden, or orchard to a house or messuage, an article adapted to the use of the property to which it is connected, and which was intended to be a permanent accession to the freehold. An article. We're going to get into that. In fact, it's funny because that word right there, when I see that, last night when I spoke of that interview with Ken Doss, and he was talking about the Copyright Act of 1790, they speak of such things. They speak of articles or books, and I'll get into that later tonight. But you got to understand that what Ken is talking about coming from his perspective, the Copyright Act of 1790 does something very specific, and they are talking about these things. It says here, an article adapted to the use of the property to which it was connected, and to which was intended to be a permanent accession to the freehold. A thing is deemed to be incidental or appurtenant to land when it is by right used with the land for its benefit, as in the case of a way or watercourse or of a passage for light, air, or heat from or across the land of another. My Father's name is intended to be used with my physical existence. My son, when he writes his lineage on a piece of paper or anything else, he uses my last name. It's the only way him and I are connected. If he just wrote Alex on anything, anybody could be his father, except genetically it always comes back to me. A thing is deemed to be incidental or appurtenant to land when it is by right used with the land for its benefit. What good is think about this. If I didn't ever use my father's last name, and I had no last name, hey you, what could I do without a last name? Nothing. Ask the people that are out there running away from it. I mean, the question I get is, hey, Kurt, when you get out of the system and you don't have a name, what do? Well, that's not my intent. I'm not that stupid. Now we'll go to appurtenant, which is right below that. Appurtenant, belonging to, accessory or incident to, adjunct, appended, or annexed to, answering to accessorium in the civil law. An accessory. Employed in leases for the purpose of including any easements or servitudes used or enjoyed with the demised premises. A thing is appurtenant to something else when it stands in relation of an incident to a principle and is necessarily connected with the use and enjoyment of the latter. A thing is deemed to be incidental or appurtenant to land when it is by right used with the land for its benefit. Appurtenant. My Father's name is appurtenant to my physical body. It's attached to it. And that makes it real estate. My Father's name is the house of Kallenbach. The house. My physical existence is the land upon which that house sits. And that's the real estate that Lucy and Charlie Brown was speaking about. You need the house and the land. What's interesting, I wasn't thinking about this earlier, but this is the way my brain works. A house. My Father's name is the house. Kallenbach is the house. Look at this. In Black's Law, if you go to house, page, believe it or not, it's on page 666, or household. Household. Adjective, belonging to the house and family. It's domestic. Household, a family living together. Those who dwell under the same roof and compose a family. A man's family living together constitutes his household. By the way, that if you remember the letters that I wrote, I was coming from the position of the father over a household. The term household is generically synonymous with family for insurance purposes and includes those who dwell together as a family under the same roof. Generally, the term household is used in automobile policies as synonymous with home and family. Let's go to house real quick. Structure that serves as the living quarters for one or more persons or families. I'm looking for something here. Here's what's funny. It says a household, a man's family living together constitutes his household, though he may have gone to another state. They're talking about the father. If the father has gone to another state, what happens to the house? If the father is the last name, and the father goes to another state, what happens to the family? Why would they put that in here? A man's family living together constitutes his household, though he may have gone to another state. And it is lowercase, by the way, the word state. I'm just trying to show you that the intent behind all of this is to split things up, to confuse them. Okay, let's get back to Haslam real quick. In the principle of those cases is that the manure made in the usual course of husbandry upon a farm is so attached to and connected with the realty that, in the absence of any express stipulation to the contrary, it becomes appurtenant to it. They're talking about the poop. The poop on a farm. When animals are dropping poop all over the farmland, they're saying that poop belongs to the farm. It belongs on the land. It belongs with the land. It's appurtenant to the land. It says the principle was established for the benefit of agriculture. It found its origin in the fact that it is essential to the successful cultivation of a farm that the manure produced from the droppings of the cattle and swine fed upon the products of the farm from the land should be fed upon the products of the farm from the land should be used to supply the drain made upon the soil in the production of crops. In other words, the fertilizer. It becomes fertilizer, feeding the soil, which is becoming drained through the growth of the crop. So the fertilizer, the poop, becomes part of the farmland, which otherwise would be impoverished and barren. In other words, without the poop, the land itself, the soil becomes impoverished and barren. And in the fact, the manure so produced is generally regarded by farmers in this country as part of the realty and has been so treated by landlords and tenants from time immemorial. So in an agricultural community, the poop that the farm produces belongs to the land. It's considered an appurtenance. Next page. It says the court found the plaintiff had improved the manure by piling it into heaps. The plaintiff. Okay, here goes. But this principle does not apply to the droppings of the animals driven by travelers on the highway. You see, remember, the defendant was arguing from an agricultural position, meaning that the poop became part of the land and was appurtenant to the land. It became part of the real estate. And remember that the plaintiff said it was personal property and separate from the land. Personal property is separate from the land. So it says, but this principle does not apply to the droppings of animals driven by travelers on the highway. The highway is not used and cannot be used for the purpose of agriculture. The manure is of no benefit whatsoever to it, but on the contrary is a detriment, and in cities and large villages it becomes a nuisance and is removed by public officers at public expense. So on the highway, by travelers, such things becomes a nuisance. And it says it's removed by public officers and at a public expense. So there's a cost to that. When I see removed by public officers as a nuisance, I think of the public health department. I think of when they come in and clean up that afterbirth, that is being removed by the health department and at a public expense, which means there might be a bill or a lien involved with the cleanup. Or maybe it's salvaged. It says, the finding in this case is that the removal of the manure and scrapings was calculated to improve the appearance and health of the borough. Winnebago County Health Department. The appearance and health of the bureau. Do you think the health department has anything to do with birth records? The afterbirth material? The foundling child? The left behind material? It is therefore evident that the cases relied upon by the defendant have no application to the case. In other words, agricultural. But it is said that the manure was personal property. In other words, not attached to the land. It was the possession of the owner of the fee. It was the possession of the owner of the fee. In the hospital situation, who is the owner of the fee? Who's the owner of the fee where the hospital sits? I guess maybe a lot of people need to know what the word fee means. Fee. I'm not going to, it says, I'm going to go to estate. An estate of inheritance without condition belonging to the owner. I'm looking for, it's an estate in lands. Let's just make it simple. An estate in lands. The hospital sits on land, and that land is where? In Winnebago County. The county may make a claim upon that particular land. The county may, but where is the county located? It's in Illinois. So realistically, the fee may be an Illinois possession because it's within the boundaries of Illinois, subject to Illinois law. So the afterbirth drops onto the ground or the ground by way of the hospital floor. So the fee would be probably Illinois. Owner of the fee, and the scraping it into heaps by the plaintiff did not change the possession, but it continued before, and that therefore the plaintiff cannot recover, for he neither had possession nor the right to the immediate possession. The manure originally belonged to the travelers whose animals dropped it, but in being worthless to them, was immediately abandoned. And that, by the way, people, is the key to the whole thing. If the product is not abandoned, Haslam versus Lockwood does not exist. If the property is not abandoned, it doesn't become into the possession of the owner of the fee. So the state can't make a claim either. The county can't make a claim. The hospital can't make a claim. Nobody can make a claim if the property is not abandoned. That's the one thing you got to get out of this, because what you're going to find in all these court cases is that it comes down to one very simple concept. Whose is it? Whose property is it? And who can prove it? So it says the manure originally belonged to the travelers whose animals dropped it, but in being worthless to them was immediately abandoned. And whether it became property of the borough of Stamford, which owned the fee of the land on which the manure lay, is unnecessary to determine, for if it did, the case finds that the removal of the filth would be an improvement to the Bureau, and no objection was made by anyone to the use of that the plaintiff attempted to make of it. Considering the character of such accumulations upon the highways, in cities and villages, and in the light in which they are everywhere regarded in closely settled communities, we cannot believe at the borough in this instance would have had any objection to the act of the plaintiff in removing a nuisance that affected the public health and the appearance of the street. In all events, we think the facts of the case show a sufficient right in the plaintiff to the immediate possession of the property as against a mere wrongdoer. So they're saying that it was a good thing that they cleaned up this mess. A good thing that they cleaned up the mess. So that's basically it. That's basically it. That's the idea of abandonment. The concept of abandonment. And it goes back to that, whose property is it and who can prove it. Which brings me to the idea of treasure trove. See, I believe that a lot of the reason I got where I wanted to get to, when I made that final recording, I actually used specific words that would remove any intent of abandonment or treasure trove or not claiming the property. the last line of my affidavit, according to Minnesota Rule 220, says, as the genuine baby and one of the only two owners named in said certificates of title, it was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property behind to become derelict, treasure trove, or res nullius. Treasure trove is a very interesting idea here. I want to cover treasure trove. And again, I use those words specifically because I already knew what the outcome would be. I knew what it meant. Everything I do, I'm writing with the intent to get the outcome I want. The letters that I wrote for my son's case was to get the outcome that I wanted, and it happened almost exactly the way I wanted. So in your pCloud files, go to Treasure Trove. Treasure Trove. I'm going to cover that right now. Treasure Trove, there it is. Treasure Trove is an amount of money or coin, gold, silver, plate, or bullion found hidden underground or in places such as cellars or attics, where the treasure seems old enough for it to be presumed that the true owner is dead and the heirs undiscoverable. By the way, the word undiscoverable, right off the bat, when I think of any court case where they use the word discovery, you need to understand that that's exactly what they're doing. It's a process of discovery. And in every single case, what do they discover? They discovered that this highlighted area right here, where the treasure seems old enough for it to be presumed that the true owner is dead and the heirs undiscoverable. The legal definition of what constitutes treasure trove and its treatment under law vary considerably from country to country and from era to era. The term is also used metaphorically, and this is why I brought this up tonight, because of that Ken Doss concept last night, the idea of 1790 and the Copyright Act of 1790. It says the term is also often used metaphorically. Collections of articles published as a book are often titled treasure trove, as in a treasure trove of science. This was especially fashionable for titles of children's books in the early and mid-20th century. So they're even calling the idea of treasure trove children's books. And when you find out what the definition of book is and where that takes us tonight, it's going to really open your eyes. And remember, what is treasure trove? It says where treasure seems old enough for it to be presumed that the true owner is dead and the heirs undiscoverable. Treasure trove, metaphorically, collections of articles. Published. Is not the baby's name published? Everybody, they're so happy, and yay, look at baby Curtis's name, and it's in the newspaper. They call it a birth announcement. It's the first publication, which is required under copyright law. That's not just for everybody to get all giddy about seeing their baby boy or baby girl in a newspaper. That's publication, which is required. It's one of the first steps required for copyright law to take effect. Treasure trove, sometimes rendered treasure trove, with a hyphen, literally means treasure that has been found. Isn't it interesting that they use foundling for an unclaimed child? And if term wealth deposit has been proposed a more accurate alternative. Let me say that again. Wealth deposit. Wealth deposit. The term treasure trove is often used metaphorically to mean a valuable find and hence a source of treasure. Safe is a repository. A bank would be a repository, but isn't it funny? Look at this. A reserve. Don't we use reserve notes called Federal Reserve notes? What do you suppose those notes are drawing upon? Where do you think the value of those notes come from? I say it's coming from some sort of a treasure trove myself, because I actually know that's where it comes from. But it says a reserve or repository of valuable things. Trove is often used alone to refer to the concept, the word having been reanalyzed as a noun via folk etymology from an original Anglo-French adjective trove, cognate to the French past participle trouver, whatever, literally found. That's why the word trover and all that stuff, found. Something found and used when maybe you shouldn't be using it. That's what trover's all about. That's what that Haslam versus Lockwood case was about. Somebody found something, and they're arguing about who actually has the rights to it. But again, if it's found, that there's a good chance somebody lost it. And the only thing that matters is who's really is it, who's the true owner. And if the true owner is accessible, then all the other nonsense going on around this property, this treasure, not relevant. That's what we got to keep focused on. We got to keep focused on the thing, the root cause to everything. It's that thing. I mean, again, I keep telling people what they're doing is they're putting Band-Aids over melanoma. Melanoma is systemic. You need to get rid of the root cause of it. I'm going to skip over some of this stuff here. Phrases of the form etymologically correct plural, for example. This is where it gets kind of fun again. Or its fully derived plural forms. In the case of treasure trove, the typical plural form is almost always treasure troves, and here it is, with treasures trove found mostly in historical or literary works. Really? With treasures trove found mostly in historical or literary works. Is not the birth record a historical document? Yes or no? Does it prove anything in history, something from the past? Yes or no? Does it memorialize something historically? Yes or no? So it says treasures trove found mostly in historical or literary works. What about when mom puts pen to paper in the hospital and creates a title? In my case, Curtis Richard Kallenbach. I went over literary property the other night. This says treasures trove found mostly in historical or literary work. Now we're going to end up where Ken Doss was talking about, the idea of 1790 Copyright Act. Roman law. In the Roman law, treasure trove is called thesaurus, treasure in Latin, and defined by the Roman jurist Paulus, meaning an ancient deposit of money of which no memory exists, so that it has no present owner. If you yourself cannot remember arriving here, if you have no memory of your birth, if you have no memory of any claim, any happening back then, listen to what it says here, an ancient deposit of money of which no memory exists, so that it has no present owner. Money, you gotta start using your imagination on this stuff. What is money? What is your capital and labor? What's the capital and labor of your life? Ultimately becomes the energy, both intellectual or your mind and your physical body. It's the energy that you're capable of using. But it's an ancient deposit. Don't think this is 4,000 or 10,000 years ago. Ancient is 57 years ago to me. It says in the elements of Roman law, commented that this definition was not quite satisfactory, as treasure was not confined to money, nor was there any abandonment of ownership. Under the emperors, if treasure was found on a person's own land or on sacred or religious land, the finder was entitled to keep it. Found on a person's own land or on sacred or religious land, the finder was entitled to keep it. When I hear sacred, whenever I ever read sacred anywhere, all I can think of is FDR in 1933 in his inaugural address saying, "Today is the day of national consecration." He made something holy or sacred, some certain grounds or lands, and I'll tell you what it was. It was the left behind material that creates your body, because that is the house of the holy. Your physical body is the house of the holy, so what they did is they created a deed to that land. Found on a person's own land or on sacred or religious land, the finder was entitled to keep it. However, if the treasure was found fortuitously and not by deliberate search on another person's land, half went to the finder and half went to the owner of the land, who might be the emperor, the fiscus, or the public treasury. Look at that. It could go to the public treasury. Actually, that's where it went. See, what happened was is the Bureau of Land Management took it in, and who's the Bureau of Land Management? Treasury. If you look up Treasury, you're going to find that the Bureau of Land Management and Treasury are completely intertwined. So when they find this land, or they take it through eminent domain or whatever they do, it becomes part of the public treasury. We're talking about you, or not you, but your physical nature. They can't claim you, but they can certainly claim a piece of you. Public treasury, the city or some other proprietor. According to Dutch jurist Hugo Grotius, as the feudal system spread over Europe and the prince was looked on as the ultimate owner of all lands, his right to the treasure trove became common. Okay, let's go through all that. Here, let's get back down to some of this stuff. An interpretation of Roman law regarding treasure troves makes an appearance in the 13th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. This is very interesting. Let's go biblical, folks. Let's go biblical. The parable of the hidden treasure is told by Jesus of Nazareth to the crowd surrounding him and his disciples. In the parable, the treasure trove is hidden in a field. Wait a minute. The treasure trove is hidden in a field. I'm thinking Summa Theologica right now. Mother's ground, mother's land, the field. And I'm not going to get all gross on you, but plowing the field, you see where this could go. Hidden in a field, which is open country, and anyone could conceivably discover something hidden in that location. It's also assumed that the present owner has no knowledge or memory of the treasure. The finder of the treasure kept the trove secret until he could raise capital to purchase the land holding the trove. Selling all he had, the finder purchased the land and then unearthed the trove, and as the finder and owner, he was legally entitled to the entire trove. Let me tell you something. What I did, because I am the landowner, by finding it, the treasure itself, and being the landowner, when I put it all together, all three of those pieces, mind, body, spirit, when I put them all together in one place at one point in time, it says, as the finder and owner, he was legally entitled to the entire trove. That's the position I'm in right now.
We're back on.
Being recorded.
All right. Now, we need to mute everybody. Brittany? Okay, I think the recording is going. I want to get going here. If it turns off again, we're just going to have to let it go. I don't want to wait anymore. United States law. We're still at treasure trove. For example, in 1863, the legislature of Idaho enacted a statute that made the common law of England the rule of decision in all courts of the state. However, English common law principles of treasure trove were not applied in the U.S. Instead, courts applied rules relating to the finding of lost and ownerless items. Ownerless is res nullius, no owner. The treasure trove rule was first given serious consideration by the Oregon Supreme Court in 1904 in a case involving, this is weird, a case involving boys who had discovered thousands of dollars in gold coins hidden in metal cans while cleaning out a hen house. Metal cans. It's no different than a car, an automobile. The court wrongly believed that the rule operated in the same way as early rules that awarded possession and effectively legal title as well to innocent finders of the items that had been hidden or concealed and the owners of which were unknown. It's always going to go back to that. When you realize that all you have to do is make it known and claim your stuff, all of this nonsense goes away. By awarding the coins to the boys, who were the boys? The boys were the finders of the coins. You do know that the name itself, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, is a coin. It's a coin. It's known as a token or a coin. So when a cop pulls you over and finds these thousands of dollars worth of coins in this tin can that you call a car or a truck, it's the same damn thing. By awarding the coins to the boys, the court implied that the finders were entitled to buried valuables and that any claims by landowners should be disregarded. In subsequent years, the legal position became unclear as a series of English and American cases decided that landowners were entitled to buried valuables. The Maine Supreme Judicial Court reconsidered the rule in 1908. The case before it involved 3 workers who had found coins while digging on their employer's land. The court decided along the lines of the 1904 Oregon case and awarded the coins to the finders. For the next 30 years, the courts of a number of states, including Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, applied the modified treasure trove rule, and most recently in 1948. Since that time, however, the rule has fallen out of favor. Modern legal texts regard it as a recognized, if not controlling, rule of decision, but one commentator has called it a minority rule of dubious heritage that was misunderstood and misapplied in a few states between 1904 and 1948. A minority rule. Why would he use that word? Minority rule, as opposed to majority. I spoke of that earlier this week. United States state laws. The law of treasure trove in the United States varies from state to state, but certain general conclusions may be drawn. To be treasure trove, an object must be of gold or silver. Oh, paper money is also deemed to be a treasure trove since it previously represented gold or silver. On the same reasoning, it might be imagined that coins and tokens in metals other than gold or silver are also included, but this is yet to be clearly established. The object must be concealed for long enough so it is unlikely that the true owner will reappear to claim it. In other words, in order for it to be called treasure trove, it has to be unclaimed by the true owner. The consensus appears that the object must be at least a few decades old. A majority of state courts, including those of Arkansas, Connecticut, blah, 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 have ruled that the finder of treasure trove is entitled to it. Why does the state hold title? The birth record. If any of you saw any of that stuff at XYZ when I was at the county, there was an attorney, assistant state's or deputy state's attorney, that told me that that was property of the state. The birth record was property of the state. Why? Because they became entitled to it. The theory is that the English monarch's claim to treasure trove was based on a statutory enactment which replaced the finder's original right. When this statute was not reenacted in the United States after its independence, the United States independence, the right to treasure trove reverted to the finder. The finder. Who's ultimately the one that finds it after you've been missing, presumed dead? Who's the one that usually finds it? Well, I put a little note in there. It says, see page 12 at the bar, the business conduct standard, and which you do have at your P Cloud. Business conduct standards. And on page 12, there's something called intellectual property. It says, the ABA works to identify, establish, protect, and defend its rights in its intellectual property assets, including patents, trademarks, copyrights, and other proprietary information.
Recording has started.
Trivial. Remember, I went over trespass yesterday or last night, I believe. Where the finder is an employee, most cases hold that the fine should be awarded to the employer. Now look at this. If it has a heightened legal obligation to take care of its customer's property. Otherwise, it should go to the employee. A fine occurring in a bank is generally awarded to the bank, as the owner is likely to have been a bank customer, and the bank has a fiduciary duty to try to reunite lost property with the owners. For similar reasons, common carriers are preferred to passengers and hotels to guests. The view has been taken that such a rule is suitable for recently misplaced objects. Look at Hotel California is about what? Think about it at some point. But Illinois, it could be called Hotel Illinois. What they're talking about here is that when mom goes into the hospital, she's treated no differently as going into a hotel. She's an author in a hotel. So when she leaves behind a manuscript or a title to the manuscript as an author, that manuscript becomes a find. That title becomes a find, forgotten at the hotel. If you want to read about it, go into Gilbert's Law on Property. It's all in there. However, it effectively delivers title of old artifacts to landowners, since the older an object is, the less likely it is that the original depositor will return to claim it. This rule, or the rule, is therefore of little or no relevance to objects of archaeological value. Let's go down to federal law. We're almost done with this stuff. U.S. federal laws governing recovery of treasure are governed by the Archaeological Resources Protection Act of 1979. It says more than 100 years old. Archaeological resources more than 100 years old on public land belong to the government. 100 years. If they found anything like a last name or anything on somewhere, forgotten, misplaced, it belongs to the government. The term archaeological resource means any material remains of past human life. The term archaeological resource means any material remains of past human life or activities which are of archaeological interest as determined by federal regulations. Material remains of past human life. Man, you know what? Even though I'm only 56 years old, I'm certain there were material remains in the hospital of human life. Such regulations include, but are not limited to, pottery, basketry, bottles, weapons, projectiles, tools, structures, or portions of structures, pit houses, rock paintings, rock carvings, intaglios, graves, human skeletal materials, or any portion or piece of any of the foregoing items. Any portion or piece. Graves. Stone markers. Monuments. Memorials. Graves. The definition of archaeological resource and archaeological interest has been broadly interpreted under U.S. agency regulations in recent years to include nearly anything of human origin, more than 100 years old. While permits to allow recovery of such items have largely restricted to dig by credentialed archaeologists. The effective ARPA, as currently defined by federal regulations, outlaws virtually all treasure hunting of items more than 100 years old, even treasure troves of gold and silver coin or scrip, under penalty of total forfeiture. Furthermore, the federal policy against spoliation and removal of archaeological resources of any type from federal or Indian lands, even coins and scrip less than 100 years old, means it is unlikely that a finder of gold or silver coinage on federal lands will prevail with an argument that the find constitutes a treasure trove of coinage, but rather embedded property that belongs to the property owner, i.e. the government. By the way, when it says government like this in a lowercase g, could it mean me? If I am self-governing, am I not the government over my kingdom, my physical existence? Am I not self-governing, self-determining? The government. Capital G might mean something different, but the government of what? The broad use of ARPA to target not only archaeological looting, but also to prohibit all treasure hunting on federal or Indian lands has been criticized on the grounds that total prohibition and forfeiture simply encourages concealment or misrepresentation of the age of the found coinage or treasure trove, thus hampering archaeological research, as archaeologists cannot study items that when found will never be reported. This is an interesting last line here. It says, there is analogous state legislation. Special rules also apply to grave goods from Indian burials discovered on federal and tribal lands under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, enacted 16 November 1990. Let me ask you something, just food for thought. If you were born to the soil of America, are you not considered Native American? Native American. See, this is where you start to get into ideas such as the idea of jus soli by blood or jus sanguinis by soil. And you start to identify a man's country at that point. I'm going to go into that next week or the week after. But Native American, I would think that if you were born to the soil of America, that would be considered Native American. And all these people claiming to be Americans, they would be native to America. So that's treasure trove. But remember right at the top of this, right at the top of treasure trove, it said, the term is also often used metaphorically. Collections of articles published as a book are often titled treasure trove. As a book. How many of you people have ever been arrested and booked? This is especially fashionable for titles of children's books in the early and mid-20th century. Book. I'm just going to pull up that 1790 Copyright Act just for a second here, because I only want to read the first line or first two lines. Let me get out of this, and I'm going to pCloud, and I'm just going to pull up the Copyright Act of 1790. Copyright Act of 1790. Let's see, where is that? Because I want people to listen to it, but you really do have to listen to that with a critical ear, because Ken doesn't understand that the chattel property, the intellectual property. Remember that titles, substance give rise to titles. Without the substance, the title doesn't exist. What was I looking up here again? Copyright Act. Copyright Act of 1790. Now think about this. 1790 was a long time ago. How many years after the Constitution was this act created? One year. So they took no time in staking their claim upon what I will discuss in 2 weeks called cultural property. Cultural property. Well, this Copyright Act says an act for the encouragement of learning by securing the copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors and proprietors of such copies during the times therein mentioned. This is pretty powerful stuff when you look at it, but it says securing copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors. The authors. So let's just go to blacks real quick. And I'm going to just start with the word book. And that's on page 165. A book. Oh, but Kurt, I know what a book is. Yeah. Page 165. Okay. Book. An assembly or concourse of ideas expressed in words. A bound volume consisting of sheets of paper not printed containing manuscript entries, such as a merchant's account books, dockets of courts, etc. A register, or to register or make reservation for transportation, lodging, by the way, etc. To set date and time for engagement or appointment. When I saw that, I went, holy cow. To set date and time for engagement. Engagement. Page 474. See, what happens is when you're around this stuff long enough, certain key words to engage. That's exactly what was going through my head. To engage. Again, 474. Engagement. To engage. To employ. Boy, that word came up quite a bit in Treasure Trove. To employ or involve one's self. To take part in. To embark on, as in a journey, but to take part in. To take part in. That sounds like a level of interest to me. Engagement. A contract or agreement characterized by exchange of mutual promises. Mutual promises, like reciprocal positioning. See, when I hear about the concept of a promise, I think of the Declaration of Independence, for crying out loud, where it says, we declare. And then it goes on to say, and to these ends what? We secure it by our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That sounds like a promise to me. It sounds like, hey, listen, in order for me to live in that place, if I want to participate in that world, that land, that idea, I have to do something. I have to make some sort of a promise. And that's what it says here. It says mutual promise. So I thought, well, there's a pretty important word there, promise. Page 1092 in blacks. 1092. I hope you can start to see how these things all connect. 1092. Okay. Wow. Promises. Giant. There it is, right there. 1092, promise. A declaration which binds the person who makes it, either in honor, conscience, or law, to do or forbear a certain specific act, and which gives to the person to whom made a right to expect or claim the performance of some particular thing. A declaration, verbal or written, made by one person to another for a good or valuable consideration, in the nature of a covenant, by which the promiser binds himself to do or forbear some act and gives to the promisee a legal right to demand and enforce a fulfillment. An express undertaking or agreement to carry a purpose into effect. Promise is an undertaking, however expressed, either that something shall happen or that something shall not happen in the future. A promise is a manifestation of intention to act or refrain from acting in a specified way, so made as to justify a promisee in understanding that a commitment has been made. I'm looking to see what else might make sense here. But promise is powerful. Here's what I'm thinking about the concept of a promise. That Declaration of Independence, if you want to participate in that world, you do have something on deposit. You have to back up your idea or that promise with something. It says a declaration which binds the person who makes it, either in honor, conscience, or law. I think the declaration is in here. What does the first two paragraphs of the declaration say? I mean, this is a beautiful document. I don't mind, actually agreeing with this. Agreeing with it. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces the design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is the history of repeated injuries, blah, blah, blah. Last paragraph, what does it say? We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as a free and independent state they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And here it is. And for the support of this declaration, and for the support of this declaration, and for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That sounds like a promise to me. A mutual promise, an engagement. Now, in my travels, I also know that a book, the word book, can be found on page 825 under the word libellus. 825 of Black's Law. Libel is a funny situation to find yourself in. 825. Libellus. Remember that copyright, the 1790 Copyright Act, books and articles, bound articles, books and bound articles are what they're talking about here. Libellus, Latin, in the civil law, a little book. In the feudal law, an instrument of alienation or conveyance, as of a fief or part of it. A fief or part of it. Conveyance of a part of a fief. That fetal tissue, your kingdom, your fiefdom, is your physical existence, your body. The government of that is your mind. And it says, in the feudal law, an instrument of alienation or conveyance as of a fief or part of it. You are conveying a piece of you, of your kingdom, through a little book. Libellus famosa, or famosus. In the civil law, a defamatory publication. A publication injuriously affecting character. It's called a libel. What is a libel? Libel is a method of defamation expressed by print, writing, pictures, or signs. If you were considered to be a bastard, an orphan, an indigent, would that not be a form of libel upon your character? In its most general sense, any publication that is injurious to the reputation of another. This is libel, people. It's a little book. A false and unprivileged publication in writing of defamatory material. A maliciously written and printed publication which tends to blacken a person's reputation or expose him to public hatred, contempt, ridicule, injure him in his business or profession. It's an accusation in writing or printing against the character of a person which affects his reputation, in that it tends to hold him up to ridicule, contempt, shame, disgrace. Disgrace. An accusation. It's an instrument of alienation and or conveyance, but it says an accusation. Information. Let's go to accusation real quick. You're being accused of something in a way you don't even know exists. Accusation. There it is, page 21. Accusation. A formal charge against a person to the effect that he is guilty of a punishable offense laid before a court or magistrate having jurisdiction to inquire into the alleged crime. Accusation. Accused. To accuse, to bring a formal charge against a person to the effect that he is guilty of a crime or punishable offense before a court. Accusation is information. Information is instrument. Instrument leads you to complaint, and complaint to the word charge. Accusation is a formal charge. How many people think they know what the word charge means? Do you accept the charges? A formal charge. Charge, page 211. Charge. Verb, to impose a burden, duty, obligation, or lien, to create a claim against property, to assess, to demand, to accuse, to instruct a jury on matters of law, to impose a tax, duty, or trust, to impose a tax, duty, or trust. And look at that, to charge. The verb is to impose a trust. In commercial transactions, to bill or invoice, to purchase on credit, to indict or formally accuse, to indict. Look at this, the noun. An encumbrance, lien, or claim, a burden or load, an obligation or duty, a liability, an accusation, and this is the one that I can't believe I'm looking at. A charge. A charge is a person or thing committed to the care of another. A charge is a person or thing committed to the care of another. If we went back to etymology online for nobody or nobody, we're going to the idea again of a person or thing committed to the care of another. Who is responsible for your physical body? For that particular person? Nobody but you. Nobody but you. But here's where the crazy one is. When I go to charge, and I see a public charge, a person whom it is necessary to support at public expense by reason of poverty alone or illness illness and poverty. But here's what it says. The very first thing it says is an indigent. A public charge is an indigent. But go up to charge, it says a person or thing committed to the care of another, but a public charge is an indigent. And what is an indigent? Page 695. Indigent. In a general sense, one who is needy and poor, or one who has not sufficient property to furnish him a living, nor anyone able to support him, to whom he is entitled to look for support. I got to break that sentence down because I know there's no possible way anybody got that. One who has not sufficient property to furnish him a living, nor anyone able to support him. Anyone able to support him, to whom he is entitled to look for support. When you think of standing, when somebody says they have standing, in order to have standing, you have to have substance. You have to have something to stand upon. In other words, something supporting you, something substantial. It says, nor anyone able to support him. Anyone able to support him. It's almost like you don't have anybody to support you, to whom he is entitled to look for support. Entitled. What is the title tied to but your DNA? It's tied to the very thing that gives you existence. It's called the gist or the grounds upon which you stand. It's your physical existence. An indigent don't have that. The term commonly used to refer to one's financial ability and ordinarily indicates one who is destitute of means of comfortable subsistence so as to be in want. An indigent. A person or thing committed to the care of another. There's your brother's keeper position. You are your brother's keeper, but what they did is they created a brother. That fetal afterbirth is your brother. It's also your means of support. That's the very thing. It entitles you to a body. It entitles you to physical existence. Without it, you are missing, presumed dead. See what I got over here left on P-Cloud. I thought I had something pulled up for you guys. I did. Okay. Back to that Ken Dost 1790 idea about the book or the title or that particular scenario. You need to read that 1790, but what you're going to come back to is the idea. Here's what's happened. Remember, a father has gone to another state. It's called household. The father's name is the house. Kallenbach is the house. My mother's land that she gives me is the land of my soul. So the house must be appurtenant to the land. It must be attached to the land. If it's not attached to the land, I'm not here. I have no home. Where is the father's name located? Where did it go? It went to the Library of Congress. And it's found on the shelf in the Library of Congress. And this is why it's important. Now, in the next couple weeks, I'm going to be covering industrial property and cultural property. So I'm going to explain the connection, and this is just going to be off the top of my head. When Mom walks into the hospital carrying a package in her womb, she steps from the Republic, the soil of Illinois, in my case, and she goes into another land, into another territory. When she goes into that other territory, she does not stop by customs and declare the package in her womb. So when she's in that territory and delivers the package or multiple packages, does she stop by and tell anybody then? Does she declare anything then? No. When she takes baby home, does she stop by on her way out of that territory and back into the Republic? Does she stop by and declare anything at that moment? No. So there's no declaration. There's no claim. But when she leaves that territory, what does she do? She leaves behind three things, for sure, three things. She already takes baby home with her, so baby's gone. But what does she leave behind in that hospital, in that hotel? She leaves behind physical substance. Physical substance. And that physical substance is called Born Alive. And it has two constituent parts. One part is fetal afterbirth tissue called the chorion. The other is called maternal afterbirth tissue. The fetal afterbirth tissue is part of me. It's my property. The maternal afterbirth tissue is my mother's property. She also leaves behind a piece of paper with a new title on it. The title is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. It becomes the story of my life. That's the title to the story of my life. It's left behind in the hospital. So there are three things left behind. Literary property, called the title, and the chorion or fetal tissue, which is my property, and then the maternal afterbirth tissue, which is my mother's property. That's all left behind. And so now you're looking at either an idea of abandonment, lost, mislaid, but either way it could be eminent domain picked up by the state. Now that property goes into either a lost and found sort of an idea, which most people would call a trust, goes into a trust. And then they watch over this property, they administrate it, they do all the, or maybe the afterbirth is picked up by the Roman Catholic Church and certificated at that point. Remember that I just read that the charge, the public charge, is an indigent. The public charge, the easement, the stuff that goes into the public through eminent domain, it becomes a public charge. And that public charge is an indigent. What does an indigent do? I mean, again, back to the treatise on the practice of the High Court of Chancery, under paupers. Again, this is on page 63, 64 in yours, but it says, it has been said that church wardens may join in a suit with a poor person who is chargeable to the parish. Chargeable to the parish. This must be upon the principle that as the person receives his support from the parish in return have a right to benefit by whatever property the pauper, the indigent, may acquire during the time he is dependent upon them, to reimburse them for the outlay. So again, when this charge, this public charge, is left behind material, falls to the care of the church, then all of the usufruct or the fruit of your labor goes to the church. Until you get out from under the care of the church, all of your stuff that you think is yours, that you work so hard for, it actually belongs to the church by law. Why? I mean, is there any evidence that the church can take this from you? Well, yeah, of course. It's called a certificate. It's called a certificate. And if you go to Webster's 1828 and go to certificate online, what does it say? The certificate identifies what? It says to give certificate, to lodge a certificate with the proper officer for the purpose of being exempted from the payment of taxes to support the ministry in a parish or ecclesiastical society. 2, to give a certificate to, acknowledging 1 to be parishioner. So now they have evidence that you're an indigent. They have evidence that you're a pauper. They have evidence that you're under the care of the church. And now, guess who gets to lay claim to your stuff? The IRS is doing the job of just collecting the church's claim. And it all goes back to the same idea that I've been promoting now for a couple of days, or at least this week, of whose property is it and who can prove it. If it's left behind and it's found to be treasure trove, found to be abandoned property, found to be salvage, you can see all the different things that can go wrong. And do they have a legitimate claim? They do, until the rightful owner shows up and make the claim. Until that. So let's keep going. Mom walks out of the hospital with baby, but she leaves behind this other property. Here's what's interesting about the property that falls on the floor of the hospital. They create a birth record on that for that event, for that arrival. So there is substance that goes along with the event, the potential, and where is that substance located? That substance is located, in my case, in Winnebago County. And where's Winnebago County located? Inside Illinois, on the soil of Illinois. Illinois is located where? Inside the Republic, is one of the 50 Union states. So the only evidence that I would have of arriving to the United States of America is laying in the hospital as waste material. That's the only evidence I have of arriving in the United States of America. If I don't lay claim to that, I am stateless. That's called cultural property, by the way. That's where my citizenship, my Article 4 citizenship, lies in that material that's left behind. If I do a proper Minnesota Rule 220 and claim that material, I'm not only claiming the beginning of my life and gaining the age of majority, which means I'm no longer frozen at that moment and lost or missing presumed dead. I now have a place. I am in the United States of America for the first time because that's where the substance is located. When I went home with Mom and Dad, where did I go? I disappeared. See, people think that you're trying to get out of the United States, that you're trying to, escape the matrix. It's my contention that nobody's ever made it to the United States of America because they haven't laid claim to the very substance of their arrival. So there's no evidence, there's no way that you can prove that you're here. And you're being treated as a political refugee. It's almost like being quarantined. And of course, after I went over the legal definition of belief, it's possible that they could consider it a quarantine because you're nuts, believing in some of the nonsense that you believe in. Salvation. Remember that the people that wrote the Declaration of Independence were trying to get out from underneath the Roman Catholic Church and all that nonsensical belief and that authority. They came here to get out from underneath it, not go back into it. We need to be able to make the claim to that product. Everything we're going to find, it's all going to go back to one simple idea. Who is the true owner? And remember that earlier this week, I said that I want people to start to read the possession as the root of title. I'm going to start on that tonight because I want to show that even the concept of the root of title and possession, it all goes back to the same idea. They use all kinds of smoke and mirrors to talk about the same thing. I'm going to have fun with this, but if this is possession as the root of title, and all I have to do is get through the first couple of paragraphs, but I may not get past the first sentence. You know what? I'm going to read the first sentence of possession as the root of title, which is also at your P cloud, but I want to read this first sentence, and I want to know if anybody catches any of this. Remember, you got to get your mind wrapped around the concept of the material that comes out of mother's womb, and the fact that mother's waters are involved, and that we're all part of the our material, our substances of the earth. And what is the birth process biblically? What do they call it? Look at this first sentence of this document. We're going to be going over this pretty hardcore next week, so this is a really fun way to segue into this, because you're going to see the same thing in this document, just in a different light. What does it say here? The very first sentence. Now I want you to think about that birth process. Mom goes into the hospital and she's delivering baby. Baby comes out, and then a bunch of other stuff comes out of mom too. So the very first line in possession as the root of title, by the way, it says possession as a root of the title, Possession. I mean, is it possible to be, if it's out of your hands, if it's lost, missing, mislaid, abandoned, is it in your possession? Well, hell no. But look what this first line says. A beautiful seashell is washed ashore after a storm. That, in my head, I absolutely see the shell, just like the shell of an egg. The shell is the outside of the yolk. The amniotic sac is the outside that covers is the shell of baby. So a shell is washed ashore after a storm, the tempest of birth, for crying out loud. Ashore, in other words, the port of entry, the land, the beach. It shows up someplace inside Illinois, on the shore, the port of entry of Illinois. A beautiful seashell, mother's waters. Shell, the very vessel, the ship that you arrived in, is washed ashore after a storm, the tempest of birth. It says a man picks it up and puts it in his pocket. What are they talking about? They're talking about the afterbirth material, the shell, the vessel that you arrived in, a shell. And he puts it in his pocket. A second man comes along and takes it away from him by force. It's the same damn scenario as Haslam versus Lockwood, just a different way of putting it. The first man sues to recover the shell, and he is met with the argument that he never owned it at all. Well, did he? Where did the shell come from? How did the legal system respond to his claim, to this claim? How should it respond? Look at this. It goes on to say, the same man finds the same shell. Now only the state, through its public processes, comes along and insists that the shell belongs to the common fund. I believe that's actually what happens at the hospital level. I believe that when that afterbirth hits the floor, they're saying that it is now part of the fee of Illinois, in my case. The state now makes a claim. And they put it into what I call the public pool. They call it a common fund. It offers the man nothing for it, claiming that the shell was found by luck and coincidence, and not by planned and systematic labor. So look at this. If the janitor comes in and mops up the floor and picks up the afterbirth, he's the first finder. But then the state comes in and says, oh, no. That belongs to us. That's because it's part of the fee, just like in Haslam versus Lockwood. They're saying, no, it's held to the ground. It's part of the fee. It's part of the land of the state. And now it's part of the common fund. the common ground. It offers a man nothing for it, claiming that the shell was found by luck and coincidence and not by plan and systematic labor. How does the legal system respond to this claim? How should it respond? You know what? What's interesting about when the state does that, when the state, remember that in eminent domain, the state has to give you something in return. It has to give you something when it takes something. So when that afterbirth hits the floor, what's really beautiful about the system, if you can see this, is that they take it as a deposit, and then they give you state citizenship for it. They give you a place in Illinois, in my case, as one of the people. Because now the evidence of my arrival to Illinois is that material itself. So they take it through eminent domain, but they give me an Illinois citizenship for it, which is actually an Article 4 citizenship within the, or citizenry within the Republic. So that's my stake. That's what the Declaration is demanding. Put up or shut up. Put something in. Secure this thing with what? With you, with your life, your lives, your fortunes, and your sacred honor. You need to secure this place. You need to be part of the economy. Not you, but your productivity. See, that's what a lot of people are misinformed on this stuff. You're not a slave. If you control your productivity and you reap the benefits of your productivity, and all of it is because you're party to the Constitution, because why? Because you were born on the soil of Illinois, and now the government's protecting your private property, but you know what? That's my point. Nobody claims the only thing that identifies their position within the Republic. Nobody does, or very few people. And everybody becomes stateless. And they're going to be treated as a refugee or having political asylum somewhere else. I'm going to finish up tonight because I don't want to get it too far into this, but I really want everybody to look at that first line. Over the weekend, I want you to look at that first line and see what I see. A beautiful seashell is washed ashore after a storm. That is telling you exactly what happens in the birth process. The shell is not baby. The shell is the afterbirth material. And it's very valuable, by the way, because it identifies certain property. But I want to leave with one word here because I'm getting out of here early tonight. The word is refugee. Let's see if refugee is in Black's Law. Because that's what everybody is being treated as, a refugee. I don't know if it is actually in here. Let's see. Refugee. No, it doesn't look like it's in here. So I'm going to have to go to Black's. No, not Black, but Webster's Online, because that's the only place I'll find it here. Definition of refugee. Where is Webster? Okay, refugee, Merriam-Webster. One that flees. Wow, did it really say that? One that flees, especially a person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. What does it say? It says one that flees, especially a person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. So right off the bat, if you're being treated as a refugee, Then Article 38 of the Labor Code Article 38 says what? And this is always going back to the same place, people. Don't get all upset that you can't follow along real easy, because it's going to start to make more sense. The Labor Code, Article 38, look at this. A refugee is one that flees. A person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. Danger. Listen, would nature, would taking care of yourself, I mean, how hard is it? I'm not even going to go there tonight. I don't want to get into it. I only have 6 minutes total. It says, one that flees, especially a person who flees to a foreign country or power to escape danger or persecution. Article 38 of the Labor Code says, private property, unless forfeited by crimes or by offenses of the owner, can be seized only by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States, if the owner has not fled. The commanding officer will cause receipts to be given, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity. Look at this. Look at how perfectly, I mean, if you're fleeing because some de facto government supposedly is ruling over something, or you're trying to get away from it, okay, we have to expatriate. There's so many morons have told me that they have to expatriate. Believe me, I thought of it when I first got involved with this 7, 8 years ago. I thought that you had to expatriate in order to get out of this de facto situation. What you don't realize is that by not claiming the very thing that puts you inside the republic, you have defected, you have fled, you have left behind the very thing that identifies your position within the United States of America. You have fled, and now you are a political refugee in some nowhere land, some oblivion. You're in a foreign country being protected by, I don't know, Roman civil law. And now, the very thing that should be protecting your private property doesn't, because Article 38 says private property, unless forfeited by crimes or by offenses of the owner, can be seized only by way of military necessity for the support or other benefit of the Army or of the United States, the support of the United States. It says if the owner has not fled, the commanding officer will cause receipts to be given, which may serve the spoliated owner to obtain indemnity. Private property will be indemnified if you don't run away. We need to expatriate, Kirk. That's the opposite. Stand your ground is to not flee. Stand your ground is to claim it. Is to claim it. I'll tell you what, and I had this conversation earlier today with a friend of mine. In all the years I've been doing this garbage, I always thought that the United States of America was corrupt and everything else. It may be screwed up because everybody has fled. But I've never felt better about my position, because I realize that in order to make the changes, in order to have a voice, you have to be here. If you're part of the welfare state and you're one of the indigent and you're being taken care of by the Roman Catholic Church, you don't have a voice. You are the one that you're undermining the United States of America. You're turning all the property over to the church, because the church wardens are entitled to your usufruct, the fruits of your labor. And if that's not the enemy of the state, I don't know. You're undermining as a minor. It's like claim jumping. You're digging under my land and you're taking all the value of my stuff and giving it to somebody else. It's a claim jump. You got to get to the United States of America, and the only way to do it is to claim the very moment in time and the position and the DNA that's all tied together there, way back there in history. To claim that history, the only way that I know to do it is Minnesota Rule 220. And on that note, I'm just going to get redundant. It's time to go. Minnesota Rule 220. Stand your ground. Make the claim. I'm going to go over that copyright stuff in a couple of weeks. But I just wanted to let you know that, Ken Dost has only half of the equation. He's claiming only a title. He needs to claim all of it. You need to claim the root. You need to possess the root of that title. And that's the substance. You need to claim the substance. That's what we're talking about here, people. All right. Good night, everybody.